Jens is joining on screen.
If it works. Oh, he's there. Jens, you're on screen.
That's wonderful. Hello, everybody in Boston, and welcome to the ICHOM conference to everyone who is on the computer right now. First of all, I would like to say thank you very much to Suzanne and to her team. What they have achieved over the last years has been outstanding, and I wish you personally all the best. And I'm so glad that I got the chance to meet you a few weeks ago at our strategy meeting. An outstanding team and wonderful work. Thank you. But I'm now here on a screen to speak today on behalf of the whole team that started ICHOM 10 years ago. My dear colleagues, Peter and Caleb will talk to you live at the stage right after me. And I am very sorry that I cannot personally attend this meeting. However, even here in Europe, a few thousand miles away from the Boston Plaza Hotel, the spirit of the meeting and of ICHOM is palpable. So thank you very much for having me. The idea and vision that finally led to the foundation of ICHOM started in early 2012, when Professor Michael Porter, the Bishop William Lawrence University professor at Harvard Business School, and my dear friend Stefan Larsson, senior partner and managing director at the Boston Consulting Group, came together and discussed how the vision of value-based healthcare can be supported and what is needed in order to transform healthcare to become more patient-centric. Together with Martin Ingvar, the Barbro and Bernard Osher professor for integrative medicine at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden, they decided to found a non-for-profit institution dedicated to the science and the practice of outcome measurement in medicine. It has been my particular pleasure to serve as the founding president of this institute starting in October 2012. The picture you see here is showing the three co-founders and myself signing the papers of ICHOM's foundation at Michael Porter's office, and truly unforgettable moment for myself. Next slide, please. At the very beginning of ICHOM, there was a strong vision. We need to transform healthcare to a value-based system where care providers are systematically measuring outcomes that matter to their patients. We need to make outcome data comparable and visible. And we need to benchmark data in order to systematically improve care delivery across the globe. Although this vision was pretty clear, anything else was completely unclear. Even the name of the institution, the logo, the colors went through various rounds of iteration. But what stayed unchanged was our goal to make it as hard to pronounce as possible. And if you look at the first version, those who are complaining about ICHOM, Michael Porter once said it sounds like a sneeze, ICHOM. You know, ICHOM would have been even worse. So we stay with ICHOM, and I know that the iteration of colors hasn't finished yet. Next slide, please. Much more challenging than names, colors, and logos has been our discussion about the right strategy. We started with the ambition to build a large repository, including outcome data and definitions from all registries across the globe that we have heard of. This endeavor, called IROM, the International Repository of Outcome Measures, had already been started in 2012, and Caleb can tell you about many night hours he spent together with others putting data together into a highly complex database. However, after a while, we learned that just collecting data and definitions will lead us to nowhere. Instead of just summarizing the chaos of outcome measurement, we decided to become the leading institution that is standardizing outcome measurement. We knew from different industries that we studied in detail that standardization is the most important step in order to harmonize efforts, join forces, and create a common language that can be used across the healthcare systems of the world. In order to get to medical condition-specific standard sets that matter to patients, we were putting working groups together that were led by ICHOM project leaders. And Caleb will tell you later about this exciting process. Next slide, please.
Maybe just a quick check, Jens, because we can still hear you well, but we can't see you. I don't know if the technician noticed, but please continue.
Thank you. In order to make the results of the working groups understandable and tangible, Peter DeBay developed the pictorial of the ICHOM wheel that is showing the relevant dimensions of the outcome and the outcome measures for a medical condition. The wheel was actually developed from a pictorial that a pioneer of outcome measurement, Dr. Ernest Codman from Boston, already used a century ago. And you see here on this slide the first drawing of this Codman wheel that finally turned into the ICHOM wheel. This is a drawing from 2014 that we found in our files. In order to underline our mission that the patient needs to always to be in the center of care, we included pictures of patients in the center of this ICHOM wheel. And we are proud that this principle has been continued over the following 10 years and 44 outcome sets that have been developed since, and that Suzanne has shown a slide earlier on. Next slide, please. But most important, we needed, in 2012, a team. We needed people who were fully dedicated to the vision of ICHOM. We needed risk takers for whom a strong vision and a restless support of our co-founders were more important than high salaries or impressive titles on glossy business cards. We needed outstanding talents and hard-working professionals that wanted to play a role in the exciting journey towards value-based healthcare. And we found them. Even more, I was happy to work during my tenure as the first ICHOM president with a dedicated group of experts and students that became not only brothers and sisters in crime, but true friends. And I needed co-leaders who were able and ready to grow a mustache in order to show their full dedication and friendship to Movember, the Movember Foundation, who gave us money for the first ICHOM standard set. I'm looking back to my 3 years with ICHOM as the most fruitful, most inspiring, and most rewarding years of my professional life. And I want to take the opportunity to thank my team and our 3 co-founders for all the trust and support over 10 years. And now I hand it over to my friend Peter DeBay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jens. Thank you, Jens. And you haven't changed a bit in the last 10 years. I only notice you need glasses right now. That wasn't the case 10 years ago. But it does, it does bring back memories from 10 years ago. And it was indeed an amazing journey. And we did become friends, and we still are. So that's wonderful. So let me try to give you a little bit more insight in how it all started, and especially the operational, the practicalities of it. Because right after we got together, and this was in November 2012, around the first conference of ICHOM, we had to figure out, you know, what are we actually going to do as a team? There were huge plans, but there was just the 3 of us at that point. And so we decided that first we had to look for a nice office space with the right vibe. And there were a few options, including a basement on Harvard Business School premises. And we started a little bit of a debate on whether, you know, employees needed natural light to function or not, whether there should actually be windows in an office space or not. And we had a little bit of a, yeah, I would call it a cultural debate even. We also had a debate about whether it was important to have good coffee, an espresso machine in an office space. And also there was some differences of opinion. I must say that in the end, on both of these two things, the Europeans won. So we did find a nice space close to Harvard Square on 12 Arrow Street, and we did buy an espresso machine as one of the first purchases that we did. I must say this does not necessarily reflect how all discussions went, because on many other things, it was our American team member who, who we decided on was the right way to go. So we managed and did find a really nice space. And already that first week, we decided as a sign of friendship to one of our founders that we were gonna max out IKEA, our credit cards at IKEA, and drive to IKEA and buy lots of, office furniture, etc., and spend the weekend together with our friends and family to build it all up and sort of put together the office. So we became customer of the year. What we also did at that time was bring together a great team and making use of all the talent that walks around here on the streets in Boston. From Harvard, from MIT, we were able to hire students, do our research, and we decided we wanted to stay very close to the legends that started our mission on endpoints and on outcomes. So we looked at Florence Nightingale already in the 19th century talking about outcomes and talking about definitions and dimensions of outcomes. We talked about Ernest Gottman, who wrote very important publications on this. We looked at Donna Bedian, and obviously we looked at Michael Porter and Elizabeth Theisberg as really the founders of what we were going to do. And we started a 1989 publication of Donna Bedian on Gottman. I would really recommend to read it. And we realized how obsessed Gottman was on the notion of measuring endpoints that we now call outcomes. But it was really wonderful to really sort of look at the history of all this. We also spent a lot of time on our mission and vision. And we had discussions on this a lot. And we decided to double down on standardizing outcomes that matter most to patients. We needed a new definition of success. And we wanted to get closer to the foundation of the idea to really redefine healthcare. And we are so proud that ICHOM has kept this alive over the last 10 years. We made it our personal mission, and especially Jens did, to explain what outcomes really are. And that's why I like to share a very short clip of a video from 10 years ago, where he used his favorite tool in the office, which was a very old-fashioned blackboard. It was one of the demands that Jens, you really had when we moved into the office. And I think that Jens is still doing this today, explaining what outcomes really are using a blackboard. And I think it's part of our mission, actually, as a group here together as well, to keep explaining what we really mean by outcomes that matter most to patients.
But at the end, what is really important for the patient are not all the indicators which are measured in here, but the outcomes that somehow change his life. And these are things like survival, incontinence, erectile function, and anxiety. And if we were reporting these outcomes back into the system and back to the patient, we would have a totally different system, which is providing basically more value to the patient and to the doctors than we see today.
I've heard Jens tell this story a million times, and I think we will hear him do that much more often, and I tell this story now very often as well, and I think we all should. So although I'm not a marketeer, we decided that we really needed to align the brand to the mission and the way that we visualize what ICHOM does. So we wanted to make it patient-centric, friendly, and personable, and therefore we literally placed the person or the patient at the center of the way that we visualize the outcome sets. And also being able to continue doing the day-to-day activities for these patients that they like best, because that is what matters most. And I think that is still, again, the way that I see it, the visual doesn't really work, but you know, how we really place the patient and their day-to-day activities at the center. And we're still doing that, and I think that is super important. We also had to get very creative on funding, in securing funding. And growing a mustache, or a mo, was part of the deal with our first outcome set sponsor, Movember, who is actually also part of this conference today. And you see here that we all are wearing a mustache on the second conference, actually, at ICHOM, which was also you know, a great laugh for all of us. So with that said, I wanted to highlight the pioneering organizations that supported us from day one on ICHOM, and that has been super important. Without them, we wouldn't be here today, I think, as ICHOM. And I also noticed that many of these organizations are still with ICHOM today, so that is really wonderful. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Caleb, who will talk a little bit more about the intellectual journey that we went through as a group.
Thanks, Peter. Good to be with all of you today. I really brought back memories being at the reception last night and seeing many people that I hadn't seen in many years. Also rekindling our international relationships. In my current organization, I don't do a lot of international travel, so it's been fun being here. Jens mentioned this database of outcome measures that we collected, and he mentioned this transition from a registry focus to a more patient-centric focus. That was actually not an easy transition. I participated with several BCG colleagues in building out that database. It was a lot of work. We took the data dictionaries of many registries, we categorized them, we put them into this database, and you know, we were pretty proud of that at the first conference. And when Jens joined, he really challenged us to ask, what are we really trying to achieve? So we changed our focus. We moved from just a registry harmonization focus to really thinking about what are the outcomes that matter to patients. And I was the clinical lead in the organization, so I was leading the interaction with our working groups. And I was a bit nervous, right? Because we'd recruited these working groups primarily from a registry harmonization focus. And I was a little anxious to tell them, hey, you know, we're changing our plans here. What do you think about it? At that time, we actually only had 2 working groups. So I talked to John Rumsfeld. He's currently, and I think at the time still was, the chief scientific officer of the American College of Cardiology. He was not our working group lead, but he was kind of the de facto scientific lead of the group. And he was nominated to participate because of his relationship with the ACC. He had built many of the registries for the college. And I told him, hey, you know, we're thinking about moving beyond the registry focus to really think about the outcome hierarchy and this multidimensional view of outcomes that matter to patients. And he responded, that's what I'm talking about. And I was a bit taken aback, and I came to find out that he is someone who had been advocating for measuring what he called patient health status for many years, for actually a decade before we had interacted with him. And that turned him from like a passive participant that was, in his words, required to participate because of his relationship in the college, to a real active promoter of the work. So I thought, okay, one down, one to go. I happened to be in Sweden a couple weeks later and met with Mats Lundström. He was our cataract working group lead. And I mentioned the same thing to him. Hey, we're changing focus. And if you know Mats, you know him to be this supremely measured and wise person. And he turned to me and he's like, you know that we've measured patients' visual function in the cataract registry for a decade. I didn't know that. And he then went on to explain to me that he had published multiple papers comparing when the patient's reported visual function and the visual acuity as reported by physicians were misaligned, and what were the reasons for that. So with the 2 of their backing, it really helped us then move into this new view of measuring outcomes that matter to patients. So Jens also shared this visual. This is the simplest way that we could describe our standard set development process. But it was a lot of work. right? We had to comb the literature, figure out what outcomes were out there, and then we wanted to go through a process to narrow them down. So you see in the second half of this slide, this title that says Proposed Minimum Set of Outcomes. You may actually, as you review our current standards or past standards, you may not believe that they are minimum, right? You may believe they are maximum, because there are a lot of outcomes in many of them. And that was always a tension, right? Because we were trying to paint an ideal. What would you really want to know in taking care of these individuals? And a lot of debate, right? What was really most important? And I actually came to think of the standards less as less of a technical standard and more of something that you aspire to. Like the high jump standard or the pole vault standard of the Olympics, something you're always trying to get better at, measuring information that matters. And the other thing that we did is we changed the participation of the working groups. You notice in the first part that we have the registry perspective, the provider perspective, we added the patient perspective, and that was really helpful. One of the first patients that we had was Ian Roos. He was someone who had participated with the Movember Foundation for many years, and he joined our localized prostate cancer standard set that was funded by Movember. And I'll just give you a moment to read this quote that he shared that just reflects how thoughtful of a person he was. So sadly, Ian passed away shortly after we finished the advanced prostate cancer standard set that he also participated in. But for our 2014 conference, he recorded a testimonial that I've linked on the slides about his journey that I would highly recommend. So we had this process. We developed these beautiful flyers and these wheels that Peter mentioned, but that wasn't enough. The board really said, hey, we don't just want pretty visuals, we want real meaty explanations of the process. So we decided we were going to submit these to peer-reviewed journals. And that was a hard process too. Right? The first publication came roughly a year after we had thought we had finished the standard set. Those of you who publish, you know that there's a lot of back and forth with journals, a lot of revisions to get to the final piece. But it really helped the rigor of our process to publish these in peer-reviewed manuscripts. This was the first one, and now we have over 30 that have been published in many different journals, as you'll see here. When I was at ICHOM, I left in about 2017. I used to track the citations to get a sense of who was talking about ICHOM, but I hadn't done that for many years, so in preparation for this conference, I decided to run those numbers again, and I was really impressed that as of the end of last year, there were over 700 peer-reviewed citations of the ICHOM standard sets. That speaks to me that people are having a conversation about outcome measurement in their respective fields. They're having a conversation about what outcomes matter, and they're using the work of the working groups to guide their work. So lastly, I just want to share this final picture. This was at the end of our 2014 conference. We were elated to be done with the conference. I can imagine the current ICHOM team will feel like this in about 36 hours. I just wanted to call out, though, that you'll see here that most of the ICHOM team there was pretty young. We were between the age of 25 and 35, most of us. And about half of the participants were young physicians, either physicians in the early part of their training or taking a break from their training or about to enter into medical school. And I think what attracted them to ICHOM was this ideal, this idea of practicing medicine in a way that really was inspiring, that perhaps was better than the experience they had had in their own medical training. And that, to me, is what resonates most about ICHOM. I'm no longer with the organization, neither is Jens or Peter, and neither are many of the ICHOM alumni, but ICHOM is not just an organization, it's really a movement. And all of us that participated in it directly as employees or as working group members, or you all as attendees at a conference, we carry that ideal back to our respective organizations, back to our respective jobs, and that, to me, is the ultimate impact. And with that, I'll hand it over to Stefan. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens. Let's see, we have a clicker here. Thank you.
Thank you. That's you.
So it's actually quite remarkable that we stand here. We're celebrating the 10th anniversary, but that means that something happened 10 years ago that we're celebrating. And 10 years ago, we were going to have the first ICHOM conference, not too far from here. But it happened to be scheduled at the time of the Hurricane Sandy. Just a couple of days before the meeting, we actually thought we'd have to cancel the whole thing because there was such an enormous storm coming up the coast. We had 104 registered participants. 80 heroes showed up. Through the snow and the storm and the water and the rain, people ended up at the Charles Hotel. Slide. Oh, yeah, that's us. Yeah. This is what Boston looked like that day. Fortunately, we were not, in this part swimming to the conference. We were upstream at the Charles Hotel. One hero to that meeting was Carl Bennett. Carl Bennett was the person who trusted us, again, when ICHOM was a meager PowerPoint presentation, and gave us the base funding. And Carl flew in from Sweden to New York, but in New York, the air traffic control said, you cannot fly to Boston, it's impossible. So Carl Bennett took a taxi. And he came in taxi from New York to Boston and came in time for the meeting. And he's here with us today. I don't know where Carl is. But if you see Carl, there he is.
Yeah, and here we are 10 years later. There are 500 of us here. And of these 500, you can pick out 15 of them were here already 10 years ago. So the idea stands. And what else?
I think it's me now.
Yeah, I think it's you.
When we opened the meeting 10 years ago, there was 3 of us on stage. And Mike was with us on stage, and as obviously you can see, he's not today. Michael turned 75 in May. He is on a long-term sabbatical. And Michael has actually decided to step down from all his external engagements. However, he's remaining with the ICHOM board, but now in the role as chairman emeritus. His passion for value-based healthcare, of course, but also for ICHOM is the same as it was 10 years ago. So we're very happy that he's remaining with the board, but respect the fact that he no longer wants to be the chairman.